Welcome to MassIVE.quant. This video will talk about how to access reanalysis container dataset in the MassIVE.quant. Let's start with the general storage structure in MassIVE.quant. There are three layers: dataset on the top, and then second container or reanalysis container, and then the last one is reanalysis. First, dataset is set up for each experiment or publication. It will have one unique identifier prefixed by MSV. Most researchers set up the one MSV ID for one publication. If the publication has one experiment and the user set up the one MSV ID for this publication, then this dataset will have one experiment. So in this case, dataset is equal to experiment and then equal to the original publications. Second, users can set up the container or reanalysis container under each MassIVE dataset to aggregate groups of related reanalysis. Each container has a unique reanalysis identifier prefixed by RMSV. We can set up the container for the group of reanalysis. Then you can use a single identifier reference to those related set of the reanalysis. Any number of reanalysis can be stored under each container. Also, container can capture the container-specific metadata. For example, if publication used many experiments and set up the one MSV ID, then the dataset could have a many experiments in one MSV ID, the dataset. Then we can set up the container for each experiment. Last is the reanalysis, which means any new result for intermediate or whole analysis. It can be new identification result, or new quantification result, or new statistical result for differential abundance analysis, or all of them. Each reanalysis also has a unique reanalysis identifier surfaced by dot and number after container ID. User enable direct reference to individual reanalysis. Let's check the two examples in MassIVE.quant. First example, MSV 79843 is MassIVE dataset identifier for IPRG 2015 experiment. All raw file and one FASTA file were submitted originally. Then the researcher set up the MassIVE dataset. I reanalyzed this raw file with the FASTA file using different data processing tool with the different parameters. For example, Skyline, MaxQuant, and Progenesis. And then also from the Skyline, I just set up the different parameters. Then I had a total 10 new reanalysis and submit them in one container, RMSV 249. After a few months, I reanalyzed this quantification file from this RMSV 249 using different options or parameters of MSDAT. For example, here I used a different number of the feature. For example, for this specific reanalysis, use the top 3, and other reanalysis, I used the top 5, and so on. And finally, I got a 12 reanalysis. And then I set up the new container, RMSV 259, to submit all 12 reanalysis for different options in MSDAT. And then I use this container ID for another next publication. Second example is MSV A4A64. This is for the publication of the Hong 2019 in MCP. This paper used many experiments to evaluate the proposed method. Some are the published dataset and others are new. There are 3 new experiments. So raw file, FASTA file, and some extra file for these 3 new experiments are originally submitted into one dataset called MSV A4A64. So here they have a 1, 2, 3 experiment. In this case, the data set MSV ID is equal to 1 reference for the original publication, and it includes 3 experiments. So I set up the container per each experiment under this data set. For example, RMSV279 for spiking VioVar OT experiment, and then RMSV280 for BioDS OT experiment. Then I set up the reanalysis under each container. For example, identification, which I convert the provide MSMS.txt file to ngTag format, which make MassIVE easily recognize this ID result. And then I also set up the new analysis for quantification, and then statistical analysis, which include R script and metadata, including the information of experiment design for this specific experiment, and then also testing result by statistical analysis. So these two are some example how we can use this storage structure in MassIVE.quant. And next, let's visit the dataset in MassIVE.quant and look around.